I want to talk to you about Afghanistan. I've read your report. The State Department says there are about 74,000 vulnerable Afghans still stuck waiting for these visas to exit the country who worked with the United States government. Your report says the State Department knew going back well into the Trump administration that it needed more staff, that it needed more resources to even begin to help get these people out. And that's before the chaos of the withdrawal. Is that one of the prime sort of sins here that you see in terms of failure to plan? There
are many sins, if you will. There was a complete lack and a failure to plan. There was no plan, and there was no plan executed. And to your point, even beforehand, I think the State Department probably didn't have the resources it needed to carry out an evacuation of this size and enormity. They had 36 consular officers at HKIA trying to process hundreds of thousands of people. They were overwhelmed, but there are so many mistakes. The biggest one, Margaret, for me, having lived through it, being in the classified space, listening to the intelligence community tell the story about this is going to be imminent. It's going to fall sooner rather than later. The military told us the same thing. And then we went to state, and they paint in the White House a very rosy picture. There's a disconnect between intelligence on the ground and what the White House is doing. I think in this report, this says it all. Like, there's no way we're going to evacuate embassy personnel from helicopters like we did in Vietnam. Yeah. And of course, we know that happened.
Well, the criticism of this report will be that this was the minority report, that it's inherently political. And that when the Republicans take the majority, if they win the majority in November, that this is going to be just a political line of attack. How do you respond to that?
I was a federal prosecutor longer than a member of Congress, so it's been almost 20 years now. And I pride myself as being objective. I think this is a fairly objective report about the failures that were made. One of the biggest ones was that the Taliban, sitting with his colleagues out of the Special Envoy, and General McKenzie, the CENTCOM commander, made an offer. You can take control over Kabul and secure it for purposes of the evacuation.
And General McKenzie said, that's not my assignment here.
Not my assignment. That's not what the commander-in-chief told me. They do run it up to the White House, and they get no response. And then later, Jen Psaki says they wouldn't have approved that. Think about what that would have changed. We had to rely on the Taliban to secure the perimeter of HKIA. That led to the chaos. It also led to the suicide bomber that killed 13 service members, men and women, and injured over hundreds of people. And it could have been avoided.
The current U.S. Special Envoy for Afghan women and girls was out of government when this was going on. She's quoted in your report as saying she still struggles to understand how this supposedly pre-planned, negotiated, inevitable withdrawal ended the way it did. It feels so much like living Schindler's List. That's a pretty powerful criticism. Who specifically needs to be held accountable, if anyone here? And is it simply just the matter of this was an intelligence failure, that the government would fall as quickly as it did, that the former president would have fled? How do you respond to that there was an inability to plan for this because it was not predicted?
Well, the intelligence community got it right. So there's no failure on the intelligence side, nor the Pentagon. They called it right. The problem was the White House and State Department putting their head in the sand, not wanting to believe what they were saying, and therefore not adequately planning. And I think, to your point, the women left behind is the worst of this entire story. I got 4 busloads of little girls from a music school out, but the Schindler's List, if you're on the list, you're going to live. If you're not on the list, you're probably going to die. 100,000 Afghan partners left behind. Remember, we said, we will protect you. That was our promise to them. No one left behind, and we left them behind to the mercy of the Taliban, and now they're being tortured and killed.
Well, the State Department says that it has tried to comply with your committee. We await their full report of their own actions. Thank you for sharing your findings today.
They have not complied with our investigation at all.
Congressman, thank you for your time today. We turn to Imtiaz Tayyib, who reports from Kabul about how life for the people of Afghanistan has taken a turn for the worse under the Taliban.
1 year after the Taliban's lightning-fast takeover of Afghanistan, and the group's grip on power is tighter now more than ever.
Across Kabul, you can see the Taliban's flag flying nearly everywhere, making it clear the U.S.-backed Republic of Afghanistan is gone and the Taliban's Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan is holding strong.
But the nation's economy is in ruins. Following the Taliban takeover, the U.S. froze billions in assets, and foreign donors pulled funding that made up nearly 3/4 of Afghanistan's annual budget, triggering what the UN calls the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, where around 90% of people don't have enough food to eat. And yet, the emirate seems more focused on controlling the lives of its citizens, especially women, who have seen so much of the progress they've made over the past 20 years disappear and have been told to cover up. High school-age girls have also largely been shut out of classrooms for the past year, but a growing number are defying the Taliban by going to unofficial schools like this one, including Nafisa, whose own brother is a Taliban. My brother doesn't know that I come to this school, she says. It's only my mother who supports me. For world leaders, how to engage with the Taliban government continues to be a challenge. Many of the men now running Afghanistan remain on international terrorist lists, some with multi-million-dollar bounties on their head, like acting Interior Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is linked to this house in Kabul, where the U.S. says Ayman al-Zawahiri, the al-Qaeda leader and 9/11 plotter, was killed earlier this month in a drone strike. Abdulkahar Balki is the Taliban spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
So far, we haven't reached a conclusion that indeed Mr. Zawahiri was present in Kabul.
To be clear, you're not confirming that Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed in that house not far from where we're sitting now?
Absolutely. We have not arrived at that conclusion.
Abdulkahar Balki, however, did agree that if the leader of a terrorist organization like al-Qaeda was found living in Afghanistan, the Taliban would consider it a violation of the nation's sovereignty. Margaret.
MTS Tayyab reporting from Kabul. We'll be right back.